In the previous tutorial, we deployed our Django application to a Linux server. In this tutorial, we are going to go through the process of purchasing a domain name and setting it up with our Django application within the AWS environment. We are going to use Namecheap to purchase our domain name and Amazon's Route 53 service to set up our DNS and configure it with our deployed application. So first things first, you will have to create a Namecheap account. After creating a Namecheap account, you can enter your payment details and proceed to get the domain. So to purchase a domain, you're going to enter your desired domain name. For example, in this search input, you can enter a given domain name that you want your application to have. So I can say footballdata.com. You can search for that. I'm sure it's already taken. You're going to find all these results. If your desired domain name is already taken, you can search for another domain name. After that, you're going to add it to cart. If you are interested, you can select one of these services. You won't be needing a web hosting or social media manager. You can consider acquiring a business email or premium DNS. But for us, all you need is the domain name. I've already purchased my domain name and it's listed as kickoffdata.com. So in your dashboard where you have your domains, you can click on manage. So this will redirect you to your domain name dashboard. So as you can see, our domain name is active. We are currently using the Namecheap basic DNS, which currently handles the routing. So at the moment, if we navigate to a domain name, what we get is the default backing page. You can see the domain has recently been registered with Namecheap. So we are going to set this up to work with our application. So my plan is to create a subdomain for my API and have the main domain to hold the main website. So in other words, I'm going to have an API.kickoffdata.com, and this will route to our Django REST framework application. And the kickoffdata.com, that ideally will be used by the React frontend. So to do this, we are going to need to adjust our NGINX configuration and our allowed hosts in our .env file in Django. So in our NGINX configuration, in the server name, here we are going to specify api.kickoff.com. Initially, this was the public IP address, as you saw in the previous tutorial. And in our .env file where we have our allowed hosts, we can just copy this and have it there. So api.kickoff.com. I've also made some changes in our YML file. I've separated the celery worker from the celery bit. The only thing that has changed is the running command. So in the first case, we are only executing the bit, and finally we are executing our celery worker in the second container. That's the only thing that you should change in the YML file. The rest should remain the same. In the future, I also want to show how you can implement a CID pipeline. That is continuous integration and continuous deployment pipeline. And for that, we'll need to create a GitHub Repo. So let's do that at the moment, this repo should hold your web application. We're going to create this repo, then clone it in our AWS instance. We're going to create a new repository. I'm going to call this kickoff API. You can skip this process if you wish. You can just use SCP to copy the files to your EC2 instance and click on create repository. After that, in our project directory, ls, we are going to initialize an empty repository. So git init, that will initialize an empty repository. Then you'll also need to add a .gitignore file. I already have mine over here. This is the recommended python.gitignore file. You can get it from this repository, gitignore repository. I'm going to have the link to this in the description. You're going to need to add the static directory. I've also added my clean player data, which is huge. I don't, because GitHub doesn't allow files larger than 100 MBs. So once that's done, we can add our current files. So git add. This will add everything. You can check it in git status. See, you have them. Then the next step is to commit these changes. So we're going to say git commit. And the message is, let me just have it as first commit. This will commit our files. Then I'm going to branch to the main branch, git branch main, and finally add my remote origin. So git remote, add origin, and we should specify the URL to our git repository. So this is it. Control-C, paste it there, and finally push. So git push origin main. So that's it. We can check it in our browser, and yeah, there we have it. So the next step is to access this, to clone this repository in our EC2 instance. So I had to create a new EC2 instance because of memory constraints. So this is it. And we can just connect. So SSH, can SSH into that. I'm using the same PEM file. So once inside there, I've already installed Docker and Docker Compose. So all that's left to do is to clone our Git repo. I'm going to use SSH keys to authenticate between GitHub and my server, because for some time now GitHub disabled password and username authentication. You can also use personal access tokens, but for this tutorial we're going to use SSH. So SSH keygen, this will generate your SSH key, and we're going to specify the type. The type will be RSA. We're also going to specify the bytes, which is 496. And I'm also going to specify comment, which will be your email address. So that will generate your key pair file, generating public, private, RSA key pair. Enter file in which to save the key. We're going to leave that as that. ID RSA. Passphrase, I'm just going to leave it empty for now. Again, I'm going to leave it empty. Then you can see your identification will be saved in this directory, and the public key has also been saved there. So the next step is to check to make sure that our SSH agent is running, and you can do that using this command. And finally add our SSH to our SSH agent using this command. This will add our SSH key to our SSH agent. So once that's ready, we can go to GitHub and configure it to use SSH. So in your GitHub profile, you're going to go to settings and select SSH and GPG keys. And here we are going to click on new SSH key. The title, we are going to give it a title. I'm going to say kickoff SSH. It's going to be authentication key. And here we are going to paste in our key. So to get our key, we can use cat to read into our file. So cat, and the file should be .pub. And finally, you can copy this SSH key and paste it to GitHub. Add SSH. Once that's done, we can test it. We can test if it's working using SSH. Git at github.com. Yes. Hi, my name Byron, you have successfully authenticated, but GitHub does not provide shell access. So that's working well. So once that's done, we can proceed to clone our repository. So in our repository, click on code, SSH, and copy it. Then you're going to say git clone, git at GitHub at that. And that is going to clone into kickoff API, ls, and yeah, we have it over there. So we can seed into kickoff API. And yeah, we have everything that we need. And in our project directory, we are going to create our .env to hold our environment variables. So touch.env and nano.env. Over here, I'm just going to copy this and paste it in. Control X exit. Yes. And finally, I'm going to need to import my cleaned player data, which is responsible for updating my player database. So I can do that using SCP. That should be cleaned player data.json. And I want to copy it to my home directory and kickoff API. So that's running, we can proceed to configure our domain name. So in our domain configuration, you're going to select custom DNS. And here we're going to paste our name servers, which you're going to get from AWS. So in your AWS console, you're going to select route 53. Then you can go to your hosted zones. Because you already have this is my website, and this is from one of my personal projects. And you can click on create a hosted zone. Enter your domain name. Ours is kickoffdata.com. So I'm going to have that there. The description is optional, so I'm going to leave it on empty. And the type should be public, and click on create hosted zone. So after that, you're going to need to create our DNS records. So you're going to click on create record. So the subdomain should be API. The record type should be A, routes traffic to an IPv4 address and some AWS resource. That's, in short, that's just the public IP address of your EC2 instance. And click on create records. So you have that. That's all we need for now. We are going to copy each and every one of these, they're just 4, into our custom name servers in Namecheap. So the first name server is that. Name server 2 should be this. Then the second name server should be this again. Then finally this. Then click on this tick to confirm everything. You can see it says the next server update may take up to 48 hours to take effect. But it usually takes a shorter time. The last time I did this, it took around 10 minutes and everything was ready. So my file is still copying. We're going to come back after it's done. So I've completed transferring the file. This is the data of about 166,000 players. If you want the full data, there'll be a link in the description. If you are happy with the minimal data, which is free, you can get it in my GitHub Repo. You can proceed. So in our EC2 instance, I can confirm that everything is ready. So we can proceed to build this up. So sudo docker compose app, we say build. We've done this before. To pull NGINX, DB, Redis, then our web application. Docker's finished building up the applications and container. We have our NGINX running well. Our celery bit and celery workers running correctly. You can try to navigate to our domain, which is api.kickoffdata.com. Let's try the API. I don't think it will work at the moment. So I'm getting this error, and that is because I think I misspelled my domain name. This should be kickoffdata.com. Kickoffdata.com. And also in my NGINX, this should be api.kickoffdata.com. So I'm going to stop this and rebuild it. So nano env allowed host kickoff. This will be kickoffdata.com. Yes. Nano nginx.conf. Server name should be api.kickoff.com. So instead of building, you can just docker compose app. This will be much quicker. So we can now try to navigate to our endpoints. And yeah, it's working. So for some reason, Docker hasn't executed the migrations and collect static and load JSON data. You're going to have to do this manually. This is evident when you navigate to the admin page. You'll notice that the CSS hasn't been loaded. So you can do that using sudo docker compose and execute the web manage.py migrate. That will first make the migrations, then collect static, no input. So after that, when we reload it, you'll see that it's now working correctly. We have our CSS being registered correctly. We don't have a super user, so we cannot log in. Then finally, I'm just going to run my custom command to populate my players database. So load JSON data. So that took some time, but it's done. We have all the players, and I think you can now proceed to create a super user. So that's sudo docker compose execute. We want web, not to say Python. Manage.py, create superuser. Email, I'm going to have it as byron@gmail.com. First name, last name, cool. Password. Superuser created successfully. This is just to make sure that everything is working correctly. So you can go to the admin. Think everything is working well. I have my players, my users. In the coming videos, you're going to see how we can implement CI/CD, and we're going to demonstrate this by building a documentation system for our application. We're also going to see how we can write unit tests. We'll also learn how to use GitHub Actions to implement all this. So far so good. The only thing that remains is to get SSL certificates for our application so that we can remove this error. At the moment, we are only using HTTP. We'll see how we can use HTTPS and add SSL certificates to our application. So if you have found this video useful, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing for similar content. See you in the next one.